The lights were blinding, the audience silent, the cameras rolling live across the nation. Everyone knew this panel would be heated. But no one was ready for what was about to happen. At the center of the stage sat Caroline Levitt Sharp, blonde, unapologetically bold, 32 years old. She had already become the face of a new, more aggressive brand of conservative politics. She smiled like someone who knew she was winning. Opposite her was Mamadou Traoré Archelou, the son of Senegalese immigrants. Dressed in a simple navy suit, he sat calmly, his eyes focused, not blinking. He had just launched a campaign to represent a struggling district in New Jersey, a Harvard Law graduate. A newcomer to the national spotlight, but he carried a presence like he belonged there. The topic was youth, violence, and race in America. Let's stop pretending, Caroline said sharply, leaning into her mic. These issues are not because of skin color. They're about choices. Families breaking down, discipline being lost. Mamadou didn't interrupt. He waited. Caroline glanced sideways, her voice gaining heat. We keep hearing about oppression. But what about responsibility? Mamadou cleared his throat, then finally spoke. His voice was calm, soft, even, but every word felt chosen. Responsibility must be shared, he said. Communities need to be stronger, yes, but so does the system. A child growing up with broken schools, police mistrust, and poverty doesn't wake up violent. They're reacting to a country that forgot them. Caroline rolled her eyes. That sounds like an excuse to me. The tension in the room grew thick. The moderator looked uneasy. Then it happened. Caroline leaned forward, her voice hard, cold. Sit down, boy, for a second. It didn't register. The phrase felt too sharp, too raw, too sudden. The audience fell into complete silence. Even the tech crew in the control room stopped breathing. The moderator froze. No one knew what to say. The words just echoed, hanging in the air like smoke. But Mamadou did not sit. He didn't even flinch. He remained standing, his body still, his expression unmoved. Then, slowly, he stepped closer to the mic, just enough for his voice to be picked up clearly. I can't sit, he said, because I've been standing my whole life. The silence deepened. Not a sound in the room. Even the cameras didn't cut away. Standing while my mother worked 3 jobs so I could do my homework on a table she bought with borrowed money. Standing while my father, who drove taxis for 15 years, was called a terrorist for having an accent. Standing while teachers praised my grades but asked if I cheated because I didn't look the part. He took a breath. You can sit, said, looking directly at Caroline. Because the system was built for people who look like you. It lets you. But for people like me, sitting isn't an option. If I sit, if I stay quiet, if I let that word boy pass without saying something, then I am helping the silence. That has kept too many of us invisible. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. It wasn't the kind of moment applause could touch. The moderator tried to step in, stammering, Let's move to the next question. But it didn't matter. That moment had already happened. That clip, just under 2 minutes long, was uploaded to social media before the panel even ended. It didn't just go viral, it exploded. Twitter couldn't stop talking. Instagram stories filled with quotes. TikTok creators stitched his words into videos. Celebrities reposted the moment with simple captions. Respect, courage. This is leadership. Journalists from every corner of the political spectrum began debating the phrase, sit down, boy. Was it racist? Was it rehearsed? Was it a mistake? But for millions, it didn't matter what Caroline meant. What mattered was how Mamadou answered, his words. I can't sit became a national echo. By midnight, major newspapers were running headlines like, Who is Mamadou Traoré? And the speech that shook a nation. At Mamadou's campaign office in New Jersey, the phones rang nonstop. Emails flooded in, many full of praise and thanks. Full of hate. One read, You just earned my vote. Another said, You'll regret opening your mouth. Hiss. Team looked exhausted but focused. As campaign manager, Alina whispered, "You realize what just happened, right? You're no longer just a candidate." But outside the glow of the internet, something darker was happening. Caroline's media team rushed to put out a statement. She didn't mean it racially. Her press release read, she was responding to an interruption, but her words didn't hold. Even some of her supporters were pulling back. Behind the scenes, her top advisor shouted over the phone, "You lost the room. You lost the country." And somewhere deep in Washington, a senior donor whispered to another, "We can't afford this attention right now." But Mamadou wasn't celebrating. He stayed quiet in the back room of his campaign office, phone in hand. A message from his mother lit up the screen. "They saw your heart. Be proud, but be careful." He stared at the message, then looked up. His reflection in the window stared back at him, tired, determined. This wasn't just a debate anymore, it was a spark. And sparks don't just fade, they light fires. Cable news ran the clip on a loop. The phrase "sit down, boy" became the top search term overnight. Op-eds flooded the internet, some praising Mamadou's calm and strength. Others accusing Caroline of either a racial gaffe or worse. Deliberate provocation. At Caroline Leavitt's campaign headquarters in Richmond, her team was scrambling, phones were ringing. Donors were pulling out or demanding clarification. Her press manager, Alex, paced the floor, holding a Starbucks cup with shaking hands. "We've been trending for 12 hours, and not in the way we want." Caroline was seated alone in her office, staring at the clip again, this time with the sound off. Her face in the video was cold, sharp, too sharp. The phrase had come out too fast without calculation. And Mamadou's silence in response had made her look small. Her chief strategist, Nolan, entered the room. "We need a pivot. You need to either apologize or double down." "I'm not apologizing for a moment that got twisted by social media," Caroline snapped. "Then we need to control the narrative." Right now, he owns it. Caroline closed her laptop and leaned forward. "Then let's find out who exactly he is." That afternoon, her team launched a quiet investigation. Not just opposition research, a full-scale probe. They needed something that could change the conversation. Anything. Meanwhile, in Newark, Mamadou sat with his staff in a small rented campaign office. The walls were still bare except for one whiteboard filled with policy ideas. His phone buzzed every 5 seconds with new messages, interviews, invitations, offers of campaign donations. They were growing by the minute. Alina, his campaign manager, flipped her laptop around. "You're leading in 5 polls now." 5. You've only been running for 3 weeks. Mamadou wasn't smiling. "And how many threats?" She hesitated. 12. So far, mostly anonymous. A few from blocked numbers. He nodded. "What about Caroline's team? We're hearing she's digging, might be looking into your past. School records, public records, even your family." Mamadou leaned back in his chair, eyes tired. "Let her dig. There's nothing there. Nothing I'm ashamed of." But he knew that didn't matter. In politics, the truth was never enough. They'd twist anything into a weapon if it helped them win. That night, Mamadou sat down for an exclusive interview with a respected national journalist, someone known for straight, tough questioning. The set was modest. A black background, no applause. Just 2 chairs and 2 microphones. "You've become a national figure overnight," the host began. "But not everyone sees it as a good thing. Some are calling your response rehearsed. A trap. Were you playing a political game?" Mamadou shook his head. "No, I didn't plan that moment. But I've been preparing for it my whole life. Because that wasn't the first time someone tried to shrink me with that word. It was just the first time they did it on camera." The host leaned forward. "Do you think Caroline Leavitt is racist?" Paused. "I think she's part of a system that was built without people like me in mind. Whether she knows it or not, she benefits from that system. So do I think she meant to harm? I don't know. but harm was done, and that's the point. The interview aired that night and went instantly viral again. His words, his calm, his refusal to shout or accuse, it made him even more powerful. People compared him to Obama, to King. Some said he was the voice of a new generation. Others called him dangerous. Inside Caroline's office, Nolan watched the interview with growing frustration. He's untouchable unless we find something, even a rumor, a crack. Caroline stood up, her voice cold. Then we'll make him crack. The following morning, anonymous rumors began to circulate. Tweets suggesting Mamadou had once cheated on a college exam, a whisper campaign about sealed records at Harvard, claims about foreign donors backing his campaign. None were substantiated, but none needed to be. The internet doesn't wait for proof. Alina slammed her laptop shut in Newark. It started. They're trying to smear you. Mamadou just nodded. We expected this, but it's moving fast. If we don't respond, he held up a hand. We don't fight dirt with dirt. We fight it with facts and truth. She stared at him. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly naive. Maybe both. But the pressure was growing. The threats more serious. His team insisted on extra security at events. And late at night, Mamadou sat alone in his apartment, scrolling through comments, some hateful, some hopeful, all intense. And across the country, in living rooms and classrooms, people began to take sides. It was no longer just about one comment. It was about race, about power, about whose voice mattered, and who had the right to speak back. The spark had become something else entirely. 3 days after the televised confrontation. International. Headlines carried Mamadou Troya's name. BBC called him America's new conscience. France 24 aired the clip with subtitles, noting his Senegalese roots. In Dakar, Senegal's president gave a brief statement. We are proud of the strength and grace Mr. Traoré showed on that stage. It speaks not just for America, but for every young African voice rising through history. But inside America, things were shifting faster and darker. A leaked document appeared online, suggesting that Mamadou's parents might have once overstayed a visa in the early 1990s. The claim was vague, the evidence unverified, but it spread like wildfire. Hashtags like hashtag TRAORE, truth, and hashtag illegitimate voice began trending in right-wing circles. News anchors on certain networks asked loaded questions. Was Traoré's family even legal? Caroline Levitt's press team denied involvement in the leak, but Nolan smiled when he saw the chaos online. It's working, he said. We're not beating him at the podium, but we can drown his signal. Caroline, though, wasn't at ease. Something about the way Mamadou hadn't hit back, hadn't panicked, unsettled her. And there is pressure now, even from inside her own party. Senators privately texted her, clean this up. Donors were wary. One even canceled a fundraiser, citing optics. Maybe we should pivot, she muttered aloud during a late-night meeting. Nolan looked at her carefully. Do you feel bad? I feel cornered. This wasn't supposed to become a symbol. That's the danger of underestimating. Quiet men, Nolan said. They don't need to shout to burn everything down. In Newark, Mamadou's campaign office was buzzing, not with panic but purpose. His staff, many of them volunteers, were holding organizing meetings, registering new voters, answering calls from civil rights groups, artists, even world leaders. He had gone from unknown to unforgettable in 72 hours. But Mamadou was tired. He sat with Elena, staring at a photo of his mother on his desk. She cleaned offices at night so I could stay in school. My father worked 14-hour days in a cab. And now people are saying they weren't even supposed to be here. Elena exhaled. We're in the fight now, all the way in. And we're going to win. She paused. No, we're going to matter. That's not the same thing, but it's more powerful. That afternoon, Mamadou gave a public address, not a rally, not a campaign speech. He stood in front of a small church in Jersey City, surrounded by community leaders and clergy. "I am not ashamed of my family," he said. "I am not ashamed of how we got here. We stood in line. We worked hard. We stayed quiet for years, hoping America would notice that we belonged. And when we finally speak up, when we finally ask to be seen, we are told to sit down. But I say this now with all the calm in my heart. We will not sit down anymore." His words echoed across communities. The crowd chanted, "We won't sit," over and over. And for the first time in his campaign, Mamadou smiled without hesitation. But not everyone was cheering. The Department of Homeland Security, under pressure from Congress, quietly began reviewing Mamadou's family immigration records. A request for an internal inquiry was filed, citing public concern. At the same time, an international media watchdog released a report, "Digital Harassment of Political Candidates of Color in the U.S." Mamadou's case was featured prominently. The report went viral. That night, on a CNN primetime panel, journalists debated the meaning of the moment. "This isn't just about one candidate or one comment," said one guest. "It's about who gets to speak, who gets to lead, and what happens when someone challenges that script." On the same show, a clip was aired of Mamadou walking into a school in his district, surrounded by children. One young boy shouted, "I want to stand like you." Caroline watched the segment from her hotel room in Iowa. Her team had scheduled a new town hall, an attempt to reset her public image. But she felt something shift inside her. The fire she had once used to dominate debates now felt like it was burning her own feet. She turned off the TV and whispered to herself, "He's not just running for office, it's changing the damn rules." Elsewhere, in a quiet basement studio in Virginia, a former intelligence officer named Cole Remmer was watching all of it with quiet interest. He wasn't aligned with either campaign, but he'd seen things. He'd worked operations. Then something about this didn't feel random. He picked up the phone, dialed a secure number. "Something off about this story," he said. "I want everything on Troy, and I mean everything. Not what's online, what's been buried." The person on the other end said nothing for a few seconds, then understood. And so the next chapter was set. Not just a political fight, but a deeper war over truth, control, and the secrets no one saw coming. The day Mamadou Troy received the anonymous envelope, it was raining. He was alone in his office, the blinds pulled shut, the only light coming from a flickering desk lamp. His team had gone home hours ago, exhausted after another marathon. Strategy session. He had stayed back to think, to write, to breathe. The envelope was slid under the door. No return address. No markings. Just his name typed in neat capital letters, Mamadou. Troy, he opened it carefully. Inside were three things: a photocopy of a classified U.S. intelligence memo, a grainy photograph of his father from 1998 standing near a man who would later be indicted for arms trafficking, and a handwritten note: "You are standing too tall. They will knock you down. Watch your six." Mamadou stared at the photo. He recognized the street it was in the Bronx, near where his father used to pick up fares. The man beside him, he had no idea, but the implication was clear. Someone was building a case not just against him, but against his entire legacy. He picked up the memo. Redacted lines covered most of it. But two phrases stood out clearly. Subject: Bukiri Troy alias Taxi Man observed. 1998 2001 under. Operation Emberlight. Potential asset or unwitting associate of foreign networks. Mamadou's hands trembled. Was this real? And if so, why now? Just then, his phone buzzed. It was Alina. "You need to turn on the news." He turned on the flat screen bolted to the wall. Caroline Levitt was giving a press conference. Her tone was serious, measured nothing like her fiery usual self. "I do not condone online threats. Want to have a real discussion about America's future. But I have a duty to ask hard questions," she said. Then came the blow. We have received documents that raise concerns about Mr. Trory's background. I ask him respectfully to clarify his family's history. Transparency matters. Mamadou turned the TV off. She had just made it official. This wasn't about race anymore. This wasn't about a slur. This was about national security, about loyalty, about painting him as the outsider again. Alina rushed in moments later, drenched from the storm. "I saw it live," she said. "They timed it perfectly. The leak, the press conference. And now the story will run all night. Tomorrow, the headlines won't be about your speech, they'll be about your father." Mamadou dropped the envelope onto the table. "They left this for me." Lena's eyes widened. "Where did this come from?" "I don't know, but someone on the inside wants me to know what's coming. Or they want to rattle you before you speak again." That night, Mamadou didn't go home. Stayed in the office, rereading the memo, searching for clues. Around 2 a.m., he opened his father's old wooden box, the one he kept, locked in a cabinet for years. Inside were faded photos, receipts, letters in French. One stood out. A letter from 2001, addressed to the Senegalese embassy, requesting asylum on behalf of a friend who had disappeared. The name on the letter, the same as the man in the grainy photo. "My father wasn't working with him," Mamadou whispered. "He was trying to help him escape something. It changed everything." Meanwhile, in Virginia, Cole Remmer was already 3 layers deep into his investigation. He had accessed files that hadn't been touched in 20 years. Cole intel from post-9/11's domestic surveillance. He saw the same memo. He saw the same photo. But he saw one more thing Mamadou hadn't. A suppressed field report stating clearly that Bakari Trory had refused to cooperate with the man in question. Unwilling. Participant. Actively distanced himself from the target. Cole leaned back in his chair. "They're twisting an old truth into a new lie," Kay said. He knew exactly what this was. A psychological operation not officially sanctioned but surgically executed. Planting seeds of doubt. Forcing a target to fight shadows while staying silent about real threats. He picked up his encrypted phone again. "I need a meeting with Trory." Quietly, no press. No phones. In Washington, Caroline sat in her hotel suite, replaying the press conference footage. She should have felt victorious, but instead, she felt like something had been set in motion that she couldn't stop anymore. Her chief strategist entered. "It's working. The polls are shifting." "We pulled independents back." Caroline shook her head. "What if we're waking something worse? What if he digs deeper?" The strategist shrugged. "Then we bury him deeper." Later that night, Mamadou stood in front of a mirror, preparing for his next interview. Not a campaign stop, not a debate. A live sit-down with a former CIA analyst turned journalist. Prime time. Global. Before the cameras rolled, the producer asked, "Do you want to avoid the topic of your father?" Mamadou shook his head. "No, I'm going to talk about him. Going to tell the truth. And then I'm going to ask why America is so scared of men who stand tall." As the lights dimmed and the red on air sign blinked to life, Mamadou felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not pride, not clarity. The real battle hadn't started yet, but he was ready. Mamadou sat under the studio lights again. But this time, it wasn't a debate stage. He was in a one-on-one interview with Sarah Keene, respected former CIA analyst turned investigative journalist. Her show aired worldwide. She had exposed war crimes, secret deals, and political lies in some of the most dangerous countries on Earth. Now, she was looking at him. "Mr. Trory," she said calmly, "let's begin with the elephant in the room, your father." He nodded. "Let's." In the control room, producers watched closely. In Washington, opposition staffers were recording every word. At Caroline Leavitt's headquarters, her media strategist leaned forward in his chair, waiting for Mamadou to fall apart, but he didn't. "My father drove taxis in New York for almost 2 decades, Mamadou began. "He was a proud immigrant, a quiet man. He worked 15-hour shifts so my brothers and I could go to school." One day, in 1998, he picked up a fare who would later be investigated by U.S. intelligence. That man was a criminal. But my father wasn't. Sarah held up a photo. His picture has circulated. It shows him beside that man. Mamadou didn't blink. I've seen it. He was helping him. That man wanted out of something dark. My father tried to help. For that, his name ended up in a file. Sarah raised an eyebrow. There's a memo from Operation Emberlight. It suggests he was a potential asset. I read the same memo. I also read the suppressed field report your team found. It says he refused to cooperate, that he distanced himself. She leaned back. So why do you think this came out now? He looked straight at the camera. Because I refused to sit down. Silence filled the studio. Then he added, because someone believes the best way to silence a son is to smear the father. Within minutes of the segment airing, hashtags exploded again. Hashtag stand tall and hashtag IREFUs to sit were trending on both sides of the political divide. Supporters called Mamadou brave. Critics accused him of using emotion to dodge national security. But something else was happening behind the scenes. Cole Remmer, the whistleblower who had helped Sarah get the Emberlight report, was now under surveillance. 2 black SUVs had been parked outside his Virginia townhouse for days. His encrypted messages weren't going through. He sent one final note to Lena before switching phones. The file was buried for a reason. There's a cover-up bigger than Trory's father. Look into Project Whiteveil. Follow the money. Alina met Mamadou the next morning in his campaign van. Project Whiteveil, she said. That's what we need to find. What is it? She showed him screenshots of a defense contract issued in 2001 around the time Mamadou's father had written a letter to the Senegalese embassy. The contractor, a private security firm with deep Republican ties. The project, a now defunct intelligence operation that had funneled resources to certain African governments in exchange for military favors and mineral access. This wasn't about your dad, she said. This is about keeping that deal buried. If your father had exposed what he saw, he'd be dangerous, Mamadou finished. Even now. Meanwhile, Caroline Levitt had gone quiet in public. But privately, she was furious. Why hasn't he broke in? She asked her strategist. Why is he stronger now than before? Her strategist lit a cigarette. Because we made him the underdog. You made it personal. Caroline stared out the window. Then maybe it's time to stop playing defense. That night, a right-wing media outlet released a new hit piece on Mamadou Ak, accusing him of secretly receiving foreign donations during his campaign. No proof. Just anonymous sources. The network repeated the claim every hour. The next morning, Mamadou's campaign office was vandalized. Spray paint across the glass doors. Trader, windows shattered. Files stolen. Police arrived. No suspects. But Mamadou didn't cancel his next event. He stood before a small crowd in Newark. Mostly students, union workers, and first-generation immigrants. He didn't speak from a script. They want me to crack, he said. They want me to be angry, reckless, or scared. But I'm not going to play their game. I'm going to tell the truth. It's because I still believe America listens when you speak. With your whole heart. Alina whispered to him off mic. Whiteveil could connect to Caroline's funders. Mamadou nodded. Then let's pull that thread. But as the crowd applauded, a man in a dark coat watched from the edge of the rally. He had no signs, no camera, just a military-style earpiece and a quiet expression. Later, he made a call. He's digging too close. He said, next move has to be clean. No more warnings. The voice on the other end said only 2 words, make it quiet. And the line went dead. Alina could feel the pressure tightening around them. Every call she made felt monitored. Every email sent came back slower than usual. She changed phones twice in 1 week, and still something felt off. She trusted Mamadou. But she didn't trust the silence. That night, she sat in her apartment, files scattered across the floor. Printouts of defense contracts, leaked memos, decrypted files. She stared at one line buried deep in a redacted Emberlight memo. White Veil assets embedded in domestic. Influence networks, full cover authorized. Influence networks. That meant political donors, lobbyists, media consultants, possibly even elected officials. She looked again at the donor list for Caroline Levitt's super PAC. One name stood out: Langhurst Global Solutions. It was a defense contractor. But Alina remembered something else. It was also the parent company of the firm that had hired the men who harassed Cole Remmer. The link was thin but real. At the same time, Mamadou was on the road. He was giving speeches in swing districts, raising more grassroots support than ever. His message had gone beyond the viral clip. Now it was about accountability. In Cincinnati, he stood before a hall of union workers and teachers. "I'm not running to be the next headline," he said. "I'm running because our system has been bought and buried. The truth doesn't scare me, but it scares the people who've made lies their business." The applause was loud. But backstage, Alina rushed to him with a file in her hand. "Need to see this." They sat in a staff van parked behind the building. She laid out the papers. Langhurst Global Funds both Project Whiteveil and Caroline's campaign. If we can prove their influence in this smear campaign, we've got them. Mamadou exhaled. How solid is it? Not solid enough to indict, but solid enough to shake the country. Just then, Elena's phone buzzed. A text from an unlisted number. "Meet me at Lafayette Bridge. It's 2 a.m. Bring no one. Truth costs something." She showed Mamadou. "This might be Cole," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Then we go." "But we don't go alone." That night, they drove in. Silence. The bridge was empty, lit only by flickering orange lamps. The wind carried a cold bite. Alina stepped out first, clutching the folder. Mamadou followed. A figure appeared in the shadows. It was Cole, but he looked rough, thinner, bruised. Around the eyes, he was wearing a hoodie pulled low. "They're watching my house," he said softly. "They tapped my car." "I've been on foot for 2 days." Mamadou stepped forward. "Why risk this?" Cole handed him a flash drive. "Because this story doesn't end with you or your father. Whiteveil isn't just some Cold War mess. It's alive. They're using influence campaigns, AI manipulation, paid disinformation, all to keep old deals hidden, deals that built political careers." Alina took the drive. "Does it name names?" "Yes. And if you use this, it won't just shake the election. It'll bring down power players from both sides." Mamadou looked at him and Caroline. Cole nodded. "She's not the mastermind. She's the mouthpiece. But she knows. And if she feels the net tightening, she burn everything to keep the game going." Suddenly, headlights appeared at the end of the bridge. 3 black cars. Elena's breath caught. "They followed you." Cole backed away. "I didn't mean to." "No," Mamadou said, already moving. "We're not staying." Jumped in the car, tires screeching against the pavement. Behind them, the vehicles sped up. Lena shouted, "Drive to the safe house." Mamadou turned hard at the next corner. The city blurred around them. Red lights, horns, sirens, a black SUV appeared in the rearview mirror. "They're not police," Alina said. Mamadou reached for his phone. "We need to go public now." They turned into a warehouse district, a maze of alleys and broken streetlights. Mamadou parked behind a delivery truck, killed the lights. Silence. They waited. Minutes passed. Then footsteps outside. Mamadou readied the flash drive. "We don't make it. This has to get out." But the footsteps moved away. They stayed quiet until dawn. By morning, Alina was at the newsroom. She met with Sarah Keene's team, handed them the flash drive. "Broadcast it. Don't wait." Mamadou stood in front of the cameras that afternoon, live on national television. "I have something to say," he began, "and I'm saying it now because silence is no longer safe." He told the country everything. About Project Whiteveil, about his father, about the money, the lies, and the threats. He didn't accuse, he revealed. And as the broadcast ended, Alina looked out the window. On the street below, crowds had gathered, not to protest, but to listen. Yet far away, in a private retreat in Wyoming, Caroline Leavitt sat in front of a fire, watching the speech on her phone. She wasn't angry, she was smiling. "He moved too soon," she whispered to herself. "Let's see how he handles what comes next." And she pressed send on a message to someone listed only as Operator Zeta. The storm hadn't passed, it had just begun. The flash drive had set fire to the nation. By noon, the day after Mamadou's speech, every major network had broken away from regular programming to analyze what he revealed. The words white veil became a trending term. Hashtags like #ICAntSit and #TheSystemKnew flooded every platform. People didn't just watch, they organized. Students walked out of classrooms. Veterans called into news shows. Mothers, activists, even former intelligence officers began sharing their stories of intimidation, of surveillance, of seeing things they were told to forget. But something darker moved underneath the surface. That morning, the files on the flash drive began disappearing from public servers. A dozen independent news websites went down at once. Fact-checking sites were suddenly under maintenance. Elena's newsroom was hit by a cyber attack. Her files were corrupted. Even her phone was bricked, completely useless. "Someone's trying to erase the story," she said, gripping a backup hard drive. Mamadou didn't respond immediately. He stared at the screen in the campaign office. One name on the leaked donor list stood out again and again: XenoArc Consulting. It wasn't a think tank. It was a data operations firm based in Zurich, with links to Langhurst Global, and more importantly, it had signed Caroline Leavitt as a strategic media client 6 months ago. "They're the cleanup crew," Mamadou said quietly. "They erase trails." "They won't erase this," Alina said. "You already said it live." Mamadou shook his head. "Not if they change the narrative. Not if they convince the public it was all fake, all political. And they were trying." On cable news, talking heads began twisting his speech. "He's making up conspiracies," one anchor said. "It's all just opposition playbook. He's trying to make himself a victim," said another. "Typical race baiting." But then a break. An anonymous drop hit a small but credible investigative site. Dozens of internal emails from XenoArc. Real-time instructions to manipulate social media trends. Payment logs. Even discussions on how to silence whistleblowers Cole's name was on the list. The public reacted fast. This time, they didn't wait for permission to be outraged. Crowds began appearing outside state houses. Petitions were signed. Leavitt's approval numbers dropped sharply, but she didn't hide. She stepped in front of cameras at a high-profile fundraiser, defiant as ever. Mamadou Traoré is nothing more than a well-packaged crisis actor. He's playing the role the radical left wrote for him. America sees through it. The crowd applauded. But the pressure was building in places she couldn't control. The Department of Justice opened a preliminary inquiry into Langhurst and its political ties. Several senators, Republican and Democrat, called for a special hearing. And on live television, Cole Remmer broke his silence, showing his face for the first time. "I was told to stay silent," he said. "But silence nearly got me killed." Mamadou stood outside Congress the next day, holding a folder filled with everything. They had left real names, real money, real victims. "I came to politics to tell the truth," he said to the cameras, "not to win. But if telling the truth is what it takes to win, then so be it." He walked into the building. Across the country, a storm moved through. Caroline's staff, started resigning. Aides leaked texts and memos showing her involvement went deeper than speeches. One document, heavily redacted, showed she had known about White's veil since her time as a communications intern for a now-deceased senator. That senator's foundation had been a shell company now traced to a covert intelligence program used to neutralize political threats in the early 2000s. One name came up again. Operator Zeta. Mamadou had no proof of who Zeta was. But intelligence insiders whispered that Zeta was never just one person. It was a role passed through administrations, someone who cleaned up history's mistakes before the public could learn the truth. And now Zeta was watching him. In the final debate of the campaign season, Mamadou and Caroline stood side by side. He was calm, she was fiery. She accused, he revealed. She denied. He explained. But when the moderator brought up White Veil, she said nothing. Her silence was louder than any answer. After the debate, backstage, she approached him. "You think? This ends with you?" she asked. Not angry, not afraid, almost impressed. "I don't care how it ends," he said. "I care how it begins." And he walked away. 2 weeks later, Mamadou Traoré was elected by the largest margin in his district's history. But that night, as he stood before the crowd, he didn't declare victory. He told a story. About his mother, tired from night shifts. About his father, insulted for his name. And about the moment he realized he didn't need permission to speak. "I didn't win tonight," he said. "We did." Every person who was told to sit down. Every voice silenced by money or memory. We stood up. We're still standing. Somewhere, watching this speech, Zeta read a report. Asset compromised. Narrative control disrupted. Status, active contingency. Required, the screen blinked out. And somewhere else, in a Cold War room under the Capitol, another plan quietly began. Because truth, once spoken, doesn't end stories. It starts them.